can we safely say that it's rather difficult for you to revere ancestors that you loathe personally?
Yeah.
You see, because many of our people have been taught that our ancestors did some bad things. And because they did all these bad things,
come on,
then they're not good enough to be revered. And then when you're presented with these other ancestors who supposedly came to your land and educated your ancestors and stopped some of their practices, like, and I hear it all the time, that Africans killed twins.
Mm-hmm.
And based on that, why in the world would you want to revere such people? You understand? But then talk about, I want you to talk about some of what the ancestors of all the races have done.
Oh man,
and yet they are still revered. Go ahead.
There's a long list of it. Again, demonizing things that are African, right, serves a greater purpose for those people that colonized you, right? It keeps you subservient. Now, as far as our ancestors doing evil things, and then you mentioned the killing of the twins. Well, let's take that for example. That was a universal practice. Not just the killing of twins, but infanticide was universal. The Romans practiced it. The Greeks did it. In South America, the Incas did it. India did it. And some Indian communities still do it today. It was done in Carthage. As a matter of fact, in human history, there are only two places that you could really say didn't practice infanticide, because whether it's killing of twins or killing of just a single child, it's all the same to me. I'll imagine that anybody who is out there that has any brain cells left will understand that it's not necessarily bad because it's twins. It is infanticide, killing of babies. Mm-hmm. Egyptians didn't practice it. When the archaeologists and people that study Egyptian history, that don't find anywhere in Egyptian history that infanticide was practiced. And then the Hebrews didn't have that practice. And as a matter of fact, for those of us that believe that we're Hebrews, Black Jews, or whatever it is, you might want to ask yourself, if the Hebrews didn't practice infanticide, then where did you get that practice from?
Okay.
Okay, that's just another footnote in history there to let you know that we have nothing to do with the Hebrews, but that's a topic for another discussion. Now, infanticide, and I'm just not going to be specific, the killing of the twins and all that. Infanticide, number one, was practiced if, number one, the baby that was born was not in good health. There was some kind of birth defect, right? They got rid of that child. Number two, and remember, a lot of these practices was based on ignorance. Science was not advanced at that time, and people were clamoring to figure out, to explain their surroundings and things that were happening to them. And then as science continued to evolve, then we got a better understanding of why people have twins, why deformities happen. It has nothing to do with evil spirits and all that. It is said that the enemy of religion is science. And that goes for the enemy of ignorance is science too. Now, infanticide was something that was practiced universal, right? So it wasn't something that just Africans did or people of Igbo, the Igbo tribe did. The Yorubas did it. As a matter of fact, as recent as 2004, it happened in Abuja. From the north that did that. Kenya till today practices infanticide, right? Killing of twins. It's still practiced in Kenya today. But I will bet you $1 million that the Kenyans have a lot of reverence for their ancestors, because the ancestor is the reason why you're here today. On a nucleus level, ancestry is your family tree. And your family tree is directly tied into the family tree of the community because you are part of it. You're part of the community. right? Ignorance is one of the reasons why infanticide was practiced, not just in Igboland, but all over the world. It was the Christian missionaries that came and then, changed that conversation, changed the dynamics, and then established it as something that was evil, and then tried to, educate the communities which they permeated or that they planned on controlling. Went ahead and, demonized it, and through an incessant educational process, people came to believe that in Igboland, for example, we were the only people that practiced it and that it was evil. I mean, there was nothing, great about infanticide other than the fact that it was practiced due to economic reasons, ignorance, political, spiritual, and even China practiced infanticide where you couldn't have more than one child.
Mm-hmm.
If you had more than one child, the child was killed. Now, a lot of the infanticide that we talk about in Igboland in particular, it wasn't the fact that if you had twins, the child was killed.
Mm.
If you had a twin, they took the child and to the forest and left the child over there to die. By whatever means the child, whether it's a wild animal that gets the child or the child gets, malnutrition and dies or what have you. It wasn't that the child was taken out and then butchered or got the head cut off or anything like that. They just took the child away. In Igbo culture, it was believed that the reason why the parents had a twin was because the father was evil. The father had done something. They understood in their mind that a human being is supposed to have one child and one child only
At a time.
at a time. And when you had two children, three children, triplets or whatever, it was like an abomination because to them, it didn't follow the natural process of procreation. This was just ignorant, right? I am very confident that if the Christian missionaries didn't come to Africa, we would have been able to evolve in our science to understand that having twins was part of a natural process and that there was nothing evil about it. But the Europeans and the missionaries defined it for us. And through an incessant education process, made us, almost like in hypnosis, to believe that what we were doing was evil. Yes, it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't, something that you have to go out there and beat your chest about, but that's just the way it happened. It was universal. And by the way, to kind of go back to a point that you made in the question that you asked me, when we talk about the evils that our ancestors did, why don't we compare it to the evils that ancestors of other human communities did? What about Genghis Khan, that butchered people from Mongolia all the way to Europe, to Gaul? How about that? How about King Henry VIII, that is revered by the British? What about Adolf Hitler? He's an ancestor of the Germans. What about the 6 million Jews of the 60 million people that lost their lives because of Adolf Hitler? What about the slave owners? Right?
Talking about the slave owners, I don't know if how many people who understand, these people that you're revering, that you think that are better than your own ancestors. Let's remember our ancestors never had prisons.
We never did.
They never had anything built strictly to harness human life and tie it up and throw them away. The ancestors were not the ones, our ancestors were not the ones that were throwing human beings, pregnant women into the sea to be eaten by sharks.
Thank you.
It was not our ancestors that did that.
Didn't do that.
So there are different ancestors all over the world that did some horrific things, but you don't throw the baby out with the dirty bathwater. Then you don't now say all of our ancestors are so bad, so you refrain and reject honoring and remembering them, and that you go to church and you pay tithes, you do whatever all they say that you have to do to free yourself of your connection to your ancestors. Why is it? I want to ask you this: why is it that it's imperative that our people of African descent celebrate this practice, the veneration. And I ask you this because I know one of the reasons why we feel, I hate to use the word, but we feel inferior to others is because, like, when particularly our children, they go to school, they see the ancestors of other people, right? But they don't tell them what those ancestors did. They just tell them about the positive things the ancestors did. Do you understand? Well, they don't tell them about the ancestors, our own ancestors, the positive things our ancestors did. You understand? So we don't see a need to honor our ancestors. We just, like you were talking about the slaves and all that. I mean, the twins and what have you. But our ancestors did a lot of good things. Humanity and civilization began in Africa. And if that's the case, that means we did a lot of positive things.
We did a lot of things. We did a lot of
things. Our ancestors did a lot of things that they should be recognized for, because frankly, for us as individuals, we're laying the foundations for people honoring us when we leave this earth. If people will measure who we are, not based on our mistakes, every human being makes mistakes, you know, or based on whatever level of ignorance we had, right? So I'm asking you the question then, and I suppose I've just touched upon a bit of it. Why is it, particularly for our young people, why must they revere? Why must we practice reverence to the ancestors? Why is that so critical and important?
Well, before I get into that, let me just say, bring a footnote to history to bear. John Hawkins, you probably heard of him. He was one of the most prominent English slavers. I made a lot of profit, to the point that when he came back after selling slaves that he got from Africa to the Spaniards in the Indies, Queen Elizabeth I sponsored the slave trade, and they made a lot of money for the crown. That was a sin against humanity. But when you talk about Queen Elizabeth and you talk about John Hawkins, you just talk about all the good that they did for their people, the institutions that were established for their people through the slave trade, right? That's what you talk about. So I just wanted to bring that, just bring that up to let people understand that ancestors from other nations committed a lot of sin, did a lot of bad things that was worse than a killing of twins in Igboland, per se. Like you mentioned earlier, throwing pregnant women overboard to be eaten by sharks, right? Using babies as fishing lures to get alligators and stuff like that. That was happening in Florida, here in the United States. These people with evil intent established institutions of profit that benefited the colonial master and the slave master. And they built institutions in reverence to these ancestors. We don't have an educational system in Africa that promotes an understanding of the contributions that those that came before us made to civilized behavior. What institutions, what part of our social apparatus was developed by certain individuals? Any record of such things that we may have had was destroyed through colonialism. Institutions in Cameroon, books that were written by the king of Cameroon in the 19th century was destroyed. So unless we have leadership in Africa that in our educational system is able to establish a curriculum that emphasizes our contribution to civilized behavior, that talks about people like Shaka Zulu and what they did to build up the Zulu nation. Talk about people like Moshe Shu, maybe the Dahomean female army. I knew nothing about the Dahomean female army until I came to the United States. And it just so happened that when I was developing the African calendar and doing my research, that's when I found out about the Dahomean female army. 5,000 ancestors, women, that were the most feared warriors in all of Dahomey and were the personal private bodyguards to the king of Dahomey. We don't talk about the contributions that we made in mathematics. For example, it was our ancestors that came up with the Le Bon Bobons, the first recognized mathematical calculation for distance. That was in Central Africa. Black folks did it. We started math before the Europeans did, before the Chinese did, before the Mayans did. Then you have the Ishiaka bones. It's also mathematics. Nobody talks about the civilization or the archaeological find in South Africa that is over 200,000 years old. We didn't learn that in school. Instead, we learned about Queen Elizabeth I. We learned about Mungo Park. We learned about Abraham Lincoln. We learned about the ancestors of all other human races, but never learned anything about our own ancestors. And the only ancestors that we cared to put in our textbooks were those people that established empires based on Islam. At least the Islamic scholars were able to get themselves into Africa's or Nigerian history books, where we talk about Ibn Battuta, the great warrior leader that established his caliphate in northern Nigeria. We talk about that. But we talk about them in terms of promoting somebody else's historical culture. People that colonized us through Islam, yes. And all of a sudden, we look upon our contribution to civilized behavior based on somebody else's spiritual philosophy. Nothing African at all. So what we need is to re-educate our people, have programs and forums like this, talk about it, let people understand there's no shame in ancestral reverence because your ancestors offer a blueprint to where, the roadmap to where we've been, the roadmap to what contributions we've made to civilized behavior, and a blueprint to where we need to go. Any mistakes that our ancestors made, it is incumbent upon us to correct those mistakes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There it is right there. There it is right there. I think you hit it right there. It is not that they didn't make mistakes. It's not that they didn't do bad things. Every culture does it. Every person. Yes. Think about it. African Americans came on a good ship, Jesus. Okay?
Thank you.
Let's talk about that.
Nobody talked about that.
Slave masters threw our ancestors pregnant, whatever. If you were weak, they destroyed you. They threw it away. But we go to their churches. Listen, let me tell you something. I'm kind of raising my voice right now. I'm just listening to you. One of the things that is so critical for us to understand, you can't talk about what people are doing to you when you allow it to be done. As a matter of fact, they're not doing it to us anymore. We're doing it to ourselves. We're teaching our children that they're less than. You see, we're not. If you don't educate your children and tell them the truth about who they are, let me tell you, somebody's going to do it for you and they'll do it gladly. All right? So don't expect anybody else. Look, the world is it's a Serengeti. Only the fittest will survive. We are all in this Serengeti trying to survive. You know what I'm saying? They will eat you alive if you allow them. Who are them? I'm talking about all those who see your weakness. That's why we are weak. We have no backbone. We embrace all kinds of nonsense. We throw our things away. Our people are being killed in China. They're being hung. They are being shot in the streets of the United States.
Disrespected all over the globe.
All over the world. And we want to know why? You want to know why? Because we disrespect ourselves. We don't believe in ourselves.